All right, welcome to this week's Editors Roundtable. I am features editor Nathan Ress. We're here with news editor Justin Smith and president Fanous Ayoub. Today we're going to have a conversation about Fanous with his upcoming policies, as well as a little plug here for Fall Fest 2016. You can look forward to a preview in this week's Griffin by Sydney Buchholz. We're expecting a huge turnout. It is spiked 4 times over the past 4 years, and it can be found in the new location. And you can read about that again from Sydney Buchholz in features. And now, Justin Smith with Fanous.
Hello. As you guys know, Fanous is our president this year for Senate. So he was kind enough to come down here to just have a little conversation about his plans for the year. So Fanous, I guess the first thing to talk about, I feel like sustainability's done a lot from last semester and onto this semester. So we can just talk a little bit about the things you think they did well so far and what you hope to go forward with them.
Right. So thank you guys for having me. Sustainability is kind of in a nice place this year because, as you're aware, they have the same committee chair, Clayton Shanahan, and he was able to do a lot last year, including bringing the bike share to campus and filing the sustainability policy brief to administration. So a lot of sustainability's goals this year is to continue on that momentum. Basically, following the strategic plan, the college has taken our sustainability policy brief as advisement moving forward with sustainability as a steering committee of their own. And so they're going to use that brief as advice as well as the sustainability committee to guide them as they get quotes and estimates in terms of greening the campus. So that'll be a predominant goal of the sustainability committee, that as well as promoting the cups that we got that get you a 10-cent discount and also the bike share. But Clayton's running with a number of other projects right now, as well as looking at like on-campus recycling and composting. There's always been some problems with recycling on campus in terms of what actually happens to it and whether it's properly recycled. So we're going to delve into that issue a little bit more going forward.
And how do you feel about the college's ability to take the policy brief and implement it? And I guess generally, how do you feel about working with administration this year?
I think that we're at our best when we do work with administration because, all of our heads are together and we're hopefully pushing all in the same direction. So, it's not just going to be a brief that stands alone and talks for itself. And that's why USA, myself, Clayton, and members of that committee will be at the table to represent the guiding principles of that brief. We don't want to just submit it and drop it off and hope for the best. So our advocacy, our time, our attention will be going into following up and making sure that things get done. It does seem to be a core principle of the administration now going forward, so hopefully we can work together.
And I know another big issue, Hurley really emphasized this both at the convocation and at the first Senate meeting, was diversity. So I was wondering if Senate has any plans moving forward. And I don't know if you caught in last week's Griffin the article where Hurley met with Afro Society, and there seems to be a divide between certain students and the perception of the Senate. So I was wondering if you could comment on that a little bit.
Right, and I think that it'd be somewhat of a misapplication to say that this is a campus issue, and any informed citizen can turn on the TV and see that diversity and racial tension, specifically between black and white communities, is at an all-time high. And as much as we'd like to pretend otherwise, that transcends into the Canisius community. And so I think what we're interested in doing as a student government is starting that dialogue, breaking down any boundaries that might be keeping communities separate, and taking a look into this issue holistically from afar. I think there was some misunderstandings with Afro Society and the Senate last year in terms of funding issues, and I think that the blame lays squarely on us, and we are doing what we can to open that dialogue better and to be more sensitive to certain issues that we haven't necessarily considered before. But going forward from that, we don't want it to stop there as just an Afro and USA issue. We filed a diversity brief that I drafted with the help of Christina Estime, our diversity chair, and it outlines a couple of really interesting initiatives, including some in late October. We're going to be starting a coffee house project where faculty and administration as well as students will get together to talk about pressing racial issues. The first one, like I said, will be in late October. It's about Black Lives Matter, and we'll have a bunch of series, and there'll obviously be like free coffee. But we're looking into bringing in a organization called Crossroads. They look at systems of oppression, frameworks of marginalization within higher education, and they can make recommendations based on what they see when they come to visit. And I work very closely with Dr. Mangione and President Hurley in terms of making sure that administration's efforts and the students' efforts are in line and that we can stay updated with what they're doing. I don't have any specifics because they seem to be in the process of formatting a committee, and that committee, to my knowledge, has not been formed yet. But we're doing as much as we can at the student level and waiting for them.
And is this related to the whole idea of changing the culture around the campus, or is this a separate issue?
Like the culture change of student government is may not be readily apparent at first. And I think the way I'd say it is Senate's been judged and Senate has been effective or not effective by the projects that we take on. And I don't want you to think that we're not going to take on projects and accomplish them this year, because we are. But an intrinsic part of our job as a student government is to look at the intangibles and to look at the culture and to look at how students feel about the campus and how students get along, and to be advocates for those concerns and those needs. And I don't think student government has done that in the past. So I think it's a little bit of a difference in terms of direction for the organization to take a look at some of the more the projects that don't necessarily have metrics of success but are equally important. And it may not be as immediately satisfying. And it may not be something you can point to on campus and say, hey, we did that last year, but I think that we would be selling ourselves short and the campus short not to look at some of these issues.
And then I guess the last thing to bring up, I know there's a couple issues I know that are still lingering over. There's the alcohol amnesty, the landlord, but yeah, that's kind of with administration and working.
I do have an update on medical amnesty.
Oh, okay.
That's going to happen. So I met with Dr. Mangione, and I drafted up a new sort of guideline for medical amnesty, and she's working with Mark Piakowski of Student Life. It's actually going to be an addendum to community standards this year. So that's sort of a new development this year. We finally got it pushed through. It took some debate and good faith debate. Administration's reservations were not that it was a bad thing. They just thought that maybe it wasn't necessary in a school that didn't really have active Greek life. There were no fatalities from drinking. And I just said, why don't we just get out ahead of it, and if that's how we practice anyways, it really wouldn't matter to write it down, to codify it. So we're going to move forward with that, and hopefully the addendum will be available for all students to read soon enough.
All right, sounds good. I know you mentioned too, what I was going to ask is about there's a student-run business possibly on campus, and possible focus on commuter issues on campus. And this wasn't an issue last semester when we talked about, but I guess if there's anything on the ramp, if you have any, I know there's a facilities liaison who I believe spoke at the last Senate meeting. I'm not sure if she knows anything additional.
Yeah. On the ramp specifically, I think I know as much as anybody else does. I personally wouldn't park my car there. It definitely seems to have structural issues, particularly on the second floor. And I don't think there's necessarily a policy for having to deal with some of these issues that I'm aware of. So I can't really speak too much to the ramp. In terms of commuter issues, though, one of the things that we are going to look into doing is, formatting a more forgiving snow policy for commuters who, might miss a quiz or be late for it, essentially rendering their score 0 when they made an effort to get to that class and to take that test. So that's obviously an unfair situation, and we want students to not be punished academically for inclement weather and the like. What was the one other part of that?
Student-run business.
The student-run business. Yeah, and that was the discussion in the cabinet meeting last week, is what do we do with underutilized or unused spaces of campus, particularly under where street side used to be, but also, the second floor of the student center. And an idea that's sort of perennially been kicked around is a student-run business. Last year, we kind of ran into the issue where we felt like we were inventing the business to invent the business, and we're not inventing a business that students wanted. So we took a step back, and we're wary of chasing something that we don't want to do something for the sake of doing it. We want to do the right thing. So we're kind of back to square one in terms of what that could look like. But that's something that we welcome student input on and student feedback, so we can move forward in the best way.
I know your door is always open, as you say.
Yep.
So, And literally always open.
It's always open.
All right. Well, that's all I got.
All right, for this week, features editor Nathan Ress, Justin Smith, Fanous Ayub. Thank you.
President.
Thanks, guys.